The call came at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday, 6 months and 8 days after they restructured my position. Klaus Hoffmann, heavy German accent, very polite. Mr. Mitchell, we have discovered a significant problem with Atlantic Industrial's compliance status. Are you available to discuss? I was drinking coffee in my little office above Murphy's Deli, watching the sunrise over Baltimore Harbor. 6 months earlier, I'd been Atlantic's compliance officer. Now I was about to find out they'd made a $425 million mistake. My name's Bob Mitchell, 52, and I've been keeping manufacturing companies legally compliant for 15 years. Before that, I spent 20 years in the Navy making sure reactor systems didn't melt down. Same principle, different uniform. When something breaks in nuclear engineering, people die. When compliance breaks in manufacturing, companies die. The day that started this whole mess was a Tuesday, too. Madison Hayes walked into our quarterly safety meeting and called my compliance team legacy overhead with pension plans. I knew right then Atlantic Industrial was heading for a cliff. Madison had that entitled MBA energy you see everywhere now. Designer blazer, fresh manicure, and the kind of confidence that comes from never actually failing at anything that mattered. CEO's niece, newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer, whatever that meant in a 127-year-old manufacturing company. She didn't shake hands when introduced. She gave finger waves and said things like digital transformation and operational agility while sipping a $12 green smoothie like she'd invented efficiency. Nobody asked her to present that day. Nobody stopped her either. She clicked through a PowerPoint titled Streamlining Legacy Functions, Phase 1. Phase 1, it turned out, was gutting my department. I'd been Atlantic's named SOC2 compliance officer for 8 years. That's 8 years of building safety protocols from scratch, watching regulatory changes sweep through manufacturing like hurricanes, documenting every nightmare scenario the EPA, OSHA, and FDA could throw at us. I had 3 external audits under my belt with 0 violations. My filing cabinets were organized like a Navy ship's inventory system. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Madison didn't even know what SOC2 meant. I watched her Google it during the meeting. That morning, she stood there grinning with her uncle's company credit card, called compliance an outdated support function, and suggested we automate oversight using AI solutions. My department was redundant, she said, overstaffed. My $78,000 salary plus $11,000 in benefits eliminated. That's $89,000 in annual savings, she bragged, almost a full marketing budget upgrade. Someone actually clapped. I didn't. I just capped my pen and asked, "Are we done here?" Madison left with her spreadsheet and a satisfied little nod. I went back to my office and opened a fresh binder. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even surprise, it was protocol, military habit. When someone's about to make a catastrophic mistake, you document everything and prepare for damage control. I started backing up files. Every access credential, every compliance designation, every legal document where my name appeared as the responsible authority. Most people at Atlantic didn't realize our entire regulatory framework still required my formal signature. Every quarterly filing, every safety certification, every audit response had Robert Mitchell listed as primary contact. No replacement had been designated. Nobody could replace me without board approval and formal reassignment paperwork filed within 21 calendar days. But Madison didn't know that. Her uncle Chuck, the CEO, probably didn't either. At first I thought someone would pump the brakes. Maybe HR would hesitate. Maybe Chuck, who once called me the guy who keeps us out of federal prison, might speak up. But nothing. HR sent the reclassification paperwork 4 days later. My new title, Senior Administrative Coordinator. My security clearance was downgraded. My invitations to leadership meetings disappeared overnight. I nodded. No complaints. Even congratulated Madison when she bragged about hitting her first efficiency target. She actually gave me a thumbs up and called me Bobby M. So I printed the original SOC2 designation letter, the one signed by the board in 2019, and emailed it to my personal account with a timestamp. Then I printed 2 copies. One went into my home filing cabinet, the other into a binder labeled Regulatory Continuity, Archive Only, and quietly placed it in the legal department's storage room. 4th shelf, left side. I didn't tell anyone. See, people think revenge needs to be loud. Dramatic exits and angry speeches about being unappreciated. But nobody appreciates a landmine either, until someone steps on it. The real beauty was in Section 12.3 of our business continuity plan. a clause I'd added 3 years ago after watching a competitor get hammered with $4.2 million in fines for improper compliance handoffs. It stated that any change to the named compliance officer must be formally reassigned by board resolution within 21 calendar days, or the designation becomes legally invalid retroactive to the vacancy date. Manufacturing compliance fines start at $15,000 per day for minor violations. After 90 days of continued violation, they escalate to $35,000 per day. The math gets ugly fast. Madison had no idea. Legal hadn't checked. Chuck just signed off on the efficiency report without reading the details. 6 weeks after the streamlining, I submitted my resignation. Clean and simple. Effective 14 days from today, I will be stepping down from my position at Atlantic Industrial Group. That's it. No drama, no exit interview demands, no company-wide email about being undervalued. They processed it like routine paperwork, disabled my access by end of day. The IT ticket was so rushed they misspelled my name and forgot to update the compliance registry. My daughter Emma called that night to check on me. She's a junior at Penn State studying engineering. Smart kid. Smarter than her old man in most ways, but she inherited my attention to detail. "Dad, you sure about this?" she asked. "What about my tuition? Spring semester's coming up. Trust me, sweetheart, this is going to work out. Your old man didn't spend 20 years in the Navy without learning how to plan for contingencies. Sounds like you've got something up your sleeve, just following proper procedures. Sometimes that's all it takes." That weekend, I updated my profile on the Federal Compliance Registry, setting my certification to active, executive designation relinquished, no replacement filed, effective day 28. Then I registered as an independent consultant specializing in crisis compliance recovery. 24 hours later, my phone started ringing. By Monday, I had 4 serious inquiries, 2 from law firms representing companies in regulatory trouble, 1 from a boutique consulting group, and 1 from a German manufacturing conglomerate that specialized in acquiring American mid-market manufacturers. That last one made me smile. Across town, Atlantic hummed along without missing a beat. No exit procedures, no knowledge transfer, no replacement training. Madison was already planning phase 2 of her optimization strategy. Chuck started talking about the company's new agility mindset in industry interviews. Nobody noticed the compliance clock ticking toward day 22. I set up shop in a small office above Murphy's Deli on Charles Street. 2 desks, a coffee maker that worked half the time, and a view of the harbor. Rent was $800 a month. My first consulting contract paid $285 per hour. The math worked better than my old salary. Every morning I'd walk downstairs and get coffee from Murphy, old Irish guy who'd run the place for 30 years. We'd talk about the Orioles, the weather, sometimes about business. He knew I'd left Atlantic but didn't pry. Military guys understand when someone doesn't want to talk about work. Day 43 of Atlantic's compliance violation, I got a call from a manufacturing company in Ohio. Their compliance officer had quit without notice, and they were facing a regulatory audit in 6 weeks. Panic mode. I quoted them $350 per hour plus expenses for a 4-week emergency engagement. They said yes before I finished the sentence. Day 67, I was on a plane to Texas helping a chemical manufacturer navigate an EPA investigation. Their previous compliance team had missed a filing deadline. The potential fines were in the millions. My job was to reconstruct their documentation trail and prove good faith compliance efforts. Military precision and attention to detail. Same skills, different battlefield. Day 89. The escalating fine structure kicked in for Atlantic. Not that anyone there knew it yet. Manufacturing compliance violations become exponentially more expensive after 90 days. The daily penalty jumped from $15,000 to $35,000. Still invisible, still accumulating, still retroactive today, 22. Day 95, I was back in Baltimore when Emma called with news. She'd been accepted into Penn State's Accelerated Compliance Engineering program. New field, growing demand, excellent job prospects. "Guess who inspired me to look into it?" she said. "Your old man's rubbing off on you. More like I realized there's job security in keeping people out of trouble. Plus, the starting salaries are really good." Day 120, Atlantic announced the deal of the century. Press release went out at 9 a.m. Atlantic Industrial Group to be acquired by Braun Industries for $425 million. The story made the Baltimore Business Journal front page. Chuck was quoted extensively about Atlantic's innovative operational transformation under new leadership. Madison was quoted too. She'd positioned herself as the architect of Atlantic's lean operational model that attracted international attention. The article mentioned her strategic elimination of redundant legacy functions as a key factor in Braun's interest. I read it over my morning coffee at Murphy's. The old man saw me smiling at the newspaper. "Good news?" he asked. "You could say that. Sometimes patience pays off." Day 135, the due diligence team from Braun Industries arrived in Baltimore. Professional, thorough, and led by a woman named Dr. Ingrid Weber, who spoke 5 languages and had the kind of attention to detail that made German engineering legendary. Her team included Klaus Hoffmann, a compliance specialist who'd spent 15 years auditing American acquisitions for European companies. They spent the first week reviewing financial records, operational metrics, and safety protocols. Everything looked clean. Madison had prepared beautiful presentations about streamlined operations and reduced overhead. The numbers were impressive. The timeline was aggressive. Chuck had already started talking about integration plans. Braun's executives were optimistic. This looked like exactly the kind of lean, efficient American manufacturer they wanted in their portfolio. Atlantic's management team was confident. Legal had reviewed everything twice. The deal was on track for closing in 2 weeks. Day 149. Exactly 21 compliance cycles since my designation had been terminated without replacement. Klaus Hoffmann was in Atlantic's legal archive room, cross-referencing regulatory filings with personnel records. Routine due diligence, nothing unusual. He wasn't looking for problems, just verifying that all certifications were current and properly maintained. That's when he found my binder. 4th shelf, left side, exactly where I'd left it 4 months earlier. Regulatory continuity, archive only. Klaus opened it and started reading. The original SOC2 designation letter, the business continuity plan with section 12.3 highlighted, the timeline requirements, the board resolution from 2019 that was never superseded. Klaus spent an hour going through every document, then he cross-referenced the dates with Atlantic's current compliance registry. Then he called Dr. Weber. The math was simple and brutal. Day 22 through day 148 equals 127 days of compliance violation. First 90 days at $15,000 per day equals $1.35 million. Remaining 37 days at $35,000 per day equals $1,295 million. Total exposure, $2.645 million, and climbing at $35,000 per day until resolved. But it got worse. Because no replacement had been designated, every regulatory filing, every safety certification, every compliance document submitted during those 127 days was legally invalid. Atlantic had been misrepresenting its regulatory standing to customers, insurers, and potential buyers for over 4 months, including Braun Industries. Day 149, Thursday morning, 9:15 a.m. Klaus Hoffmann walked into the Atlantic boardroom carrying a folder that would destroy everything Madison had built. "Who is Robert Mitchell?" he asked, setting the folder on the conference table. Madison looked confused. "He used to work here. We restructured his position last year as part of our operational optimization. But he is still listed as your named SOC2 compliance officer," Klaus said, opening the folder. "According to your federal registry in this documentation, he remains the designated authority for all regulatory filings." Chuck leaned forward. "That's impossible. We handled his transition months ago." Klaus wasn't smiling. "Where is the board resolution replacing him? The formal reassignment documentation? The updated federal notifications?" Silence. Madison started typing frantically on her phone. Chuck was already reaching for his. Legal was called out of another meeting. HR scrambled to find records that didn't exist. We assumed the transition was automatic when we restructured his role. Someone from HR offered weekly. Klaus shook his head. "Federal compliance designations are never automatic. They require explicit board action and formal replacement within 21 calendar days. You have been operating without valid compliance authority for exactly 127 days, over 6 complete compliance cycles." Dr. Weber, who had been quietly reviewing Klaus's findings, looked up from her laptop. "This represents a material misrepresentation of regulatory standing during preliminary negotiations." Madison tried to salvage the situation. "It's just paperwork. We can fix this in a day. Bring Bob back, file the forms, move forward. No, Dr. Weber said firmly. You cannot retroactively fix federal compliance violations. Manufacturing compliance fines escalate after 90 days. Your current exposure is $2.645 million, increasing by $35,000 daily. The room went dead quiet. Chuck's face had gone gray. Surely we can resolve this. It's a procedural oversight. Klaus opened his laptop and turned the screen toward the table. Your compliance violations create significant liability exposure for any acquiring entity, but more concerning is the pattern of misrepresentation. Mr. Mitchell left detailed documentation showing that proper procedures were available and ignored. He clicked to the next slide. Section 12.3 of your own business continuity plan, authored by Mr. Mitchell, explicitly outlines the 21-day requirement. This was not an oversight. This was negligence. Madison's voice cracked slightly. We didn't see that documentation. It was filed in your legal archive with clear labeling, Klaus replied. Mr. Mitchell followed proper procedure. Your organization did not. Dr. Weber closed her laptop slowly. This is a material breach of due diligence representations. We need to pause acquisition proceedings pending legal review. Chuck stood up abruptly. Dr. Weber, surely we can work through this. The deal is scheduled to close next week. Mr. Patterson, your company has been operating in federal violation for over 4 months while representing full compliance to potential buyers. This creates exposure for Braun Industries that we cannot accept. Madison tried one more time. What if we bring Bob back immediately? Full reinstatement, whatever it takes. Klaus consulted his notes. Mr. Mitchell is listed as an independent consultant. He may not be available for employment. That afternoon, Klaus called me directly. Professional courtesy, he said, wanted to understand the timeline of my departure and the transition procedures that were supposed to be followed. I was in my office above Murphy's working on a compliance manual for a client in Michigan. The call was expected. I'd been counting days on my calendar, watching the violation accumulate like compound interest. Mr. Mitchell, this is Klaus Hoffman from Braun Industries. We are reviewing Atlantic Industrial's regulatory standing as part of acquisition due diligence. Yes, sir. How can I help you? Can you confirm the timeline of your departure and any transition procedures that were implemented? I gave him the dates. Restructured on day 1, resigned effective day 42, final day 56. Explained the proper procedures, confirmed that no formal replacement had ever been designated. When he asked if I'd attempted to notify Atlantic of the compliance gap, I mentioned the binder. Regulatory continuity, archive only, I told him. 4th shelf, left side in legal storage. Should still be there. We found it, Klaus said. Very thorough documentation. Section 12.3 of the business continuity plan appears to address this exact scenario. Yes, sir. I wrote that clause in 2021 after watching a competitor get hit with $4.2 million in fines for improper compliance handoff. Seemed like prudent risk management. Indeed. Are you currently available for consulting engagement? Depends on the scope and timeline. What did you have in mind? Day 150. Friday morning. Dr. Weber called an emergency meeting. Chuck, Madison, the board, legal counsel, everyone who mattered. She laid out the situation in terms that left no room for interpretation. Atlantic Industrial has been operating in violation of federal compliance requirements for 127 days. The regulatory fines currently total $2.645 million and increase by $35,000 daily until resolved. Madison started to interrupt. Dr. Weber held up her hand. Furthermore, every compliance document submitted during this period is legally invalid. This includes safety certifications, environmental filings, and regulatory representations made to Braun Industries during preliminary negotiations. Chuck's voice was barely a whisper. What does this mean for the acquisition? It means the acquisition is terminated, Dr. Weber said flatly, effective immediately. Our legal team has identified material misrepresentation that creates unacceptable liability exposure. Madison looked like she was going to be sick. Surely we can resolve this. Bring Bob back, fix the paperwork, move forward. Trust has been compromised, Dr. Weber replied. Mr. Mitchell provided proper documentation and procedures. Your organization chose to ignore them. This was not an oversight. This was a failure of corporate governance. The Braun team was packed and gone by noon. Their final act was to formally notify Atlantic's board that due diligence had revealed material compliance violations and misrepresentation of regulatory standing. The press release went out Monday morning. Braun Industries withdraws from Atlantic Industrial Acquisition due to unresolved regulatory compliance issues. Atlantic's stock opened down 18% and kept falling. By market close, it had dropped 31% in a single day. The business press picked up the story immediately. Headlines like "Compliance Failure Kills 425 mm," "Deal," and "When Cost Cutting Goes Wrong." Tuesday morning my phone rang again. Dr. Weber this time. "Mr. Mitchell, Braun Industries is interested in retaining your services for a comprehensive compliance review of our North American operations. 18-month contract, $285 per hour, full autonomy over methodology and timeline. Are you available?" I looked around my little office. Coffee maker that worked half the time, view of the parking garage, and a stack of consulting contracts that had tripled my old salary. "Yes, ma'am, I'm available." Day 153. Wednesday afternoon. Chuck Patterson announced his early retirement, effective immediately. The press release cited personal reasons and desire to spend time with family. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership transitions and operational restructuring. Madison was asked to submit her resignation by Friday. No press release for that one. Thursday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Bob, this is Madison. Hope we can connect about industry best practices." No hard feelings. I read it twice, then deleted it. The local business press had picked up the story. Baltimore Business Journal ran a feature titled "The $425 million Mistake: How Atlantic Industrial Lost the Deal of a Lifetime." They interviewed compliance experts, corporate lawyers, and business school professors. Everyone had opinions about proper due diligence and the importance of regulatory oversight. Nobody interviewed me. That was fine. I had work to do. Emma called that weekend, excited about her acceptance into Penn State's compliance engineering program. She'd been following the Atlantic story in the business news. "Dad, they're using this as a case study in my business law class. Professor says it's a perfect example of how cutting corners on compliance can destroy shareholder value. What's your take on it? That someone at Atlantic knew exactly what they were doing when they wrote those procedures, and someone else ignored them because they thought they knew better." "Smart girl. Your old man's proud of you. I've been thinking about specializing in manufacturing compliance. Professor says the field's growing, especially with all the international acquisitions happening. Good choice. There's always demand for people who can keep companies out of trouble." Day 160. I moved into my new office at Braun Industries' North American headquarters in Baltimore. Corner office, 19th floor, view of the harbor. My assignment was simple: review compliance procedures for all Braun's U.S. manufacturing facilities and recommend improvements. The work was familiar, but the scale was impressive. 12 manufacturing plants across 8 states, each with different regulatory requirements and local compliance challenges. Braun wanted a unified system that could handle federal oversight, state regulations, and international standards. I spent the first month traveling. Michigan Automotive Parts Facility, Georgia Textile Plant, California Electronics Assembly. Each location had its own compliance officer, each with different backgrounds and approaches. Some were excellent, some were adequate. A few needed serious help. The pattern was consistent, though. The facilities that ran smoothest had experienced compliance officers who understood both the technical requirements and the business impact. The ones with problems had either cut corners on compliance staffing or promoted people who didn't understand the complexity of manufacturing regulations. Day 180. Atlantic Industrial was officially delisted from the Baltimore Stock Exchange. The company had been sold in pieces to various buyers, none of whom wanted the compliance liability that came with the corporate entity. The original headquarters building was leased to a tech startup. Most of the manufacturing equipment went to a competitor in Ohio. The final regulatory settlement was announced the following week. Atlantic's insurance covered most of the $3.1 million in fines, but the company's reputation was finished. Chuck moved to Florida. Madison's LinkedIn profile said she was exploring new opportunities in operational excellence consulting. Day 220. I was reviewing Braun's Ohio facility when the plant manager mentioned they'd hired several former Atlantic employees. "Good people," he said, experienced machinists and engineers who'd been casualties of the downsizing. "What about management?" I asked. "Couple of supervisors, but we were careful." "About compliance roles. Our legal team flagged the Atlantic situation. Anyone involved in that mess was automatically disqualified. Day 365. 1-year anniversary of my restructuring at Atlantic. I was sitting in my Braun office, reviewing the final compliance report that would wrap up my contract. 12 facilities, unified procedures, 0 regulatory violations, projected annual savings of $2.3 million through improved efficiency and reduced legal exposure. Dr. Weber had already asked about extending the contract. Braun was expanding their U.S. operations and wanted me to help evaluate potential acquisitions. The work was interesting, the pay was excellent, and the company actually valued compliance expertise. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. She'd just finished her junior year and was starting a summer internship with a compliance consulting firm in Philadelphia. Following in Dad's footsteps, she wrote, "Turns out there really is job security in keeping people out of trouble." That evening, I walked down to Murphy's for coffee. The old man was closing up but poured me a cup anyway. "How's the new job?" he asked. "Can't complain. Turns out experience is worth something after all." Funny how that works. My dad ran this place before me, his dad before him. 3 generations of Murphy's Deli. You know what they all said? "What's that?" "The customer who fires you for doing your job right wasn't worth having anyway." I laughed. "Your family's got good instincts." Speaking of instincts, you see that article in yesterday's paper? Atlantic's old building sold again, 3rd time in 6 months. No one wants to stay there long. Some buildings get a reputation, some people too. Word gets around in business. Company that fires their compliance officer to save money. Other companies remember that, makes them careful about who they hire from there. Day 400. Klaus Hoffmann called with news. Braun had identified another acquisition target, a mid-size manufacturer in Pennsylvania. Clean financials, good management, solid market position. They wanted me to lead the compliance review before they made an offer. "One question," Klaus said. "Do you know anything about this company's current compliance officer?" I pulled up their website and checked the leadership page. Sarah Rodriguez, 15 years experience, former military, engineering background. Looks solid. Excellent. We will schedule the review for next month. That night, I updated my consulting profile. 3 major acquisitions completed. $8.2 million in regulatory risk mitigated. 0 compliance violations across 15 facilities. The phone kept ringing with new opportunities. Some people spend their careers trying to be seen. I spent mine knowing where the emergency exits were located. My mistake at Atlantic was assuming someone else would read the safety manual when I left. They didn't replace me. They erased me. And like any good safety protocol, the consequences were built right into the system. Madison had called compliance legacy overhead with pension plans. Turns out legacy knowledge is what keeps companies alive when the regulations change and the lawyers come calling. Atlantic learned that lesson too late. Emma's right about job security. There's always demand for people who can keep companies out of federal prison. Business is good. Really good. The Atlantic building sits mostly empty now. For lease signs in the windows, different tenants every few months. Madison's consulting business never got off the ground. Chuck's retirement in Florida is probably comfortable, but his reputation in Baltimore manufacturing circles is finished. Me? I'm the guy companies call when they want to make sure their compliance officer is irreplaceable, because experience beats innovation every single time, especially when the stakes are measured in hundreds of millions and someone's counting on you to know where all the exits are located. Just took them $425 million to figure that out.